One of the things that has made war against the family is industrialism, or the Industrial Revolution, and urbanization. These two are related to each other. In the 18th century, the invention of the steam engine and other technological wonders caused the creation of factories and mass production, and we call that the Industrial Revolution. Before that time, most people made their living in simple trades, usually agrarian farming type pursuits, maybe a little bit of, buying and selling kind of stuff going on, but mass production was not something that was possible because there wasn't the machinery for it, there wasn't the technology for it. With the Industrial Revolution, the jobs were to be found in the factories. And so people moved to where the factories were, and the population grew around these industrial centers, and they became what we call cities. Now, there were cities in ancient times, but the modern industrial city was an urban sprawl, really, basically, where more and more people seeking the convenience of an infrastructure the city provided, and also seeking the easy money, really. A lot easier to go work at a factory and have someone pay you than to go out and farm and maybe have crop failure a few years in a row and maybe be trying to eke out a living as a dirt farmer. A lot of people are attracted to cities. In fact, as you probably know, something like 95% of the population of the world now are urbanized. They're in the cities. And that being so, most people just assume that's kind of normal and natural. And it's not anything to be lamented. That's where the jobs are. That's where the fun is. That's where the money is. That's where the people are. And all of those things should make us suspicious of it as if it's neutral. When you get that many sinners together in one place, you've got an amplification of the sinful human condition. And every evil bird inhabits Babylon. Every wicked thing is found in abundance in every city. It's interesting that God didn't make a city. He made a garden. Now, some people say, well, man's history starts in a garden and ends in a city, meaning the New Jerusalem. True, but the New Jerusalem is not a normal city. It's made up only of godly people. The unrighteous aren't there. It's a spiritual fellowship. It's the church. It's the body of Christ. Yeah, that's a wonderful community. But that's not what we're talking about when we talk about Los Angeles and New York and Chicago or any other major city. This is not a concentration of the godly. This is a concentration of the wicked. And I'm not saying Christians don't ever belong there, because there are many Christians who have urban ministries. They have, they're drawn there for the glory of God. But my suspicion is that most Christians who live in cities are there for the same reasons the unbelievers are there. The money, the stimulation, the entertainment, and all those other things, none of which have very much to do with the glory of God. And all have a very great potential to corrupt. And the Bible acknowledges this. In Isaiah chapter 5, as Isaiah is decrying many of the evils of his time, one of the things he says in verses 8 and 9 is, "Woe to them that join house to house, that lay field to field, till there's no place that they may be placed alone in the midst of the earth. In mine ears, said the Lord of hosts, of a truth many houses shall be desolate, even great and fair, without inhabitant." Now, what's he talking about? Building house to house and not leaving any room for people to be alone. He's talking about urbanization, is what he's talking about, early pre-industrial urbanization. But, most people in those days lived out in the country. They had farms. They might be outside the walls of a big city, and they'd go into the city to do business once in a while. And they'd run in there when the enemies came, so they'd be, behind the walls. But their life was out, spread out, working the ground and working, in the sweat of their face, like God said they would after the fall. Urbanization, industrialization, I'm not saying it's an unmitigated evil. I'm sure that it's in itself not as evil as some other things can be, and I think for some people it's not evil at all. But it is positively a danger, and it is definitely hard on families. The Industrial Revolution was very hard on families. It led usually to the people who were relatively poor getting their wives and their children involved in the factories too. Eventually, everyone was simply away from home. And even in the families where the husband alone worked, he was away from home in ways that he wasn't back when he was tending the farm. Family solidarity began to erode, as all historians would note, with the Industrial Revolution. And of course, we live in a time where it's a major problem. In the notes there, I put Luke 21, verses 20 through 21. This is, of course, a specialized case, but I think it might have broader application. Jesus said, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its desolation is near. Then you who are in Judea, flee to the mountains. And don't take with you your stuff from the city. In Luke 17, Jesus said, when he was talking about the same thing, fleeing to the mountains, he said, remember Lot's wife. Now, what is there to remember about her? Well, we know almost nothing about her, but we know one thing about her. God called her to leave the city, and she physically left the city, but the city never left her. It's easy to get her out of the city, but it's not easy to get the city out of the woman, or out of the man, or out of the children. Lot had at least 4 children. 2 of them got out of Sodom. The others stayed with their husbands. Lot took his family into Sodom, but he couldn't get them out again. He lost his wife and at least half of his children to Sodom. And he was a righteous man living in that city. It says in the New Testament, it says that righteous Lot, he vexed his righteous soul day by day with the unlawful deeds of that city as he saw and heard what they were doing. Just like most Christians in the big city probably. It vexes their souls. But they're strong. They're strong. At least they're sure they are. They don't know to what degree they may have been compromised, but they don't see any major issues in their lives that make them think the city is a bad place for them. But a great number of them lose their kids. Because kids aren't always as strong as their parents. And living in the city has been very hard on families. In a city, there is a corporate, communal concern for the children. It takes a village, remember, to raise a child. And when that village is all concentrated together, it's hard to keep the village's hands off of those kids. Because the village wants to own them. We have a friend in Oregon who had a baby a couple of years ago, I guess, or a year ago. And she had a baby at home. She never notified the state or anything or that the baby had been born, but somehow some social worker showed up at her door and said, we heard you had a baby and we want to give you some information on how to take care of your baby and so forth. And she said, I'm okay. I'm taking care of the baby just fine. Thanks. Don't need your help. And they kept pushing and pushing. They said, well, at least let's leave these materials with you. And there was a brochure they gave that said, the title was Oregon's Children, Everyone's Concern. Well, that's the way the city thinks. You know why? Because if your kids don't turn out good, they become part of the gang, and that is everyone's concern. So the city begins to feel they have some vested interest in the way your children are raised. If you're not raising them along the mainstream ways, they may just have to send a social service person to come and take your kids and give them to a family that will raise them along the conventional ways. This is happening. This is one of the results of people giving up the privacy and the solidarity of their family and the ability to raise their family on their own and going into cities where their children are everybody's concern. So much so that you don't even educate your children there anymore. You just send them to the state schools. The city basically replaces the family with the village. And this is pretty much what the Bible warns against in some ways.